It's a collaboration. I think that's putting it too far.
No, you wrote the novel.
It's based on this, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Berserk.
You know Keanu Reeves, Hollywood's most humble action star, the quiet force behind The Matrix and John Wick. But there's something you haven't heard, something that happened on a movie set years ago that shook him to his core. He's finally breaking his silence, and when you hear what he refused to do, even while playing a violent character, you'll understand why you will never be able to look at Keanu Reeves the same way again. This isn't fanfiction. This is real, raw, and completely unexpected. And once you know, it will change everything you thought you knew about him, the enigma of Keanu Reeves. There's something strange about Keanu Reeves, that he somehow doesn't seem to age. It's the feeling you get when you see him on screen, in interviews, or even in those blurry fan photos at gas stations. He doesn't behave like a celebrity. He barely behaves like a person who knows he's famous. And yet here he is, one of the most iconic faces in Hollywood. A man who's been a time-traveling slacker, a futuristic freedom fighter, a grieving assassin, and a cyberpunk messiah. But behind all of that, there's still a mystery no one has quite cracked. Keanu isn't loud. He doesn't go on rants. He doesn't trash hotel rooms or make red carpet scandals. And that's part of what makes him so hard to pin down. While most actors carefully sculpt their public image, Keanu feels like someone who just dropped into fame and never bothered to shape himself for it. The result is a career filled with contradictions. He disappears for months, even years, between films and pops up again like he never left. He doesn't seem to care about celebrity politics, popularity contests, or even proving himself. And yet, somehow, that quiet presence speaks louder than any public relations campaign. People love Keanu not just for the roles he plays but for the way he carries himself. There's something humble, almost monk-like, about him. He listens more than he talks. He makes people feel seen. That's rare in any industry, but in Hollywood, that's nearly extinct. But here's where things get interesting. Because for all the love and legend that surrounds him, there's still something we haven't quite seen. Something behind the kindness. A moment, one scene, that revealed more about Keanu Reeves than any red carpet interview or heartfelt quote ever could. And it didn't happen during a charity event or a public appearance. It happened on a movie set. A film that many forgot. A role that most people never expected him to take. Keanu was asked to do something he wasn't prepared for, something that made him stop and say, "I don't think I can do this." And that's when everything changed. You see, there's the Keanu we know, the action star. But there's also the Keanu we've almost never seen. The one who wrestled with his conscience in front of cameras. The one who questioned a director's call not for ego, not for screen time, but for the simple reason that his soul couldn't stomach what was being asked of him. That moment didn't go viral. It didn't trend. But once you know it happened, you can't watch him the same way again. Because this wasn't just a man playing a role. It was a man standing at the edge of who he is and refusing to cross a line, even in fiction, without a fight. And decades later, he finally revealed what happened. Breaking the mold for most of his career, Keanu Reeves wasn't seen as the kind of actor who took risks. He was the guy who made action look cool without ever breaking a sweat. He was the soft-spoken heart of Speed, the effortlessly stoic Neo in The Matrix, the haunted, disciplined killer in John Wick. Even his romantic roles had an air of mystery, like he was always slightly removed, hovering just outside the emotional storm while still somehow grounding it. He had a way of making even the most unbelievable situations feel calm. That was his thing. But Keanu isn't just an actor. He's an outlier. And like any true outlier, he's not interested in staying in one lane. Beneath the surface of his major blockbusters is a career filled with strange detours, indie dramas, experimental films, roles that barely paid the bills but gave him something else. A chance to explore. That's what led him to The Gift, a southern gothic thriller that had zero explosions, no futuristic dystopia, and absolutely no heroes. And in that mess, Keanu saw something worth doing. He didn't play the misunderstood loner or the tragic anti-hero. No, this time he went all the way into the dark. His character, Donnie Barksdale, was nothing short of terrifying, a violent, beer-soaked redneck who beat his wife, threatened people in broad daylight, and carried the kind of rage that didn't need a backstory. It just existed like a storm that never stopped spinning. And Keanu didn't play it halfway. He was angry. He was raw. He was completely unrecognizable. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. This was the same guy who helped us believe in the one, now stomping around in a dirty flannel shirt, spewing hate and fear. But the strangest part, he was really good at it. Unsettlingly good. The calm presence we were used to became something else entirely. And that's what made the performance stick. It wasn't the kind of role people expected from him, but that was exactly the point. Keanu didn't take The Gift to impress fans or win awards. He took it because it scared him. Because it forced him into a character so far removed from who he was that it became a challenge just to exist in that space. Donnie wasn't a villain with some secret charm. He was just awful. And Keanu didn't try to soften that. He leaned into it with teeth clenched. And yet, underneath all that anger, there was something off. Not with the character, but with the man playing him. Keanu carried that tension, that resistance, just under the surface. Like he couldn't quite let go of himself. And as we'd later find out, there was a very real reason for that. Because when it came time to shoot one particular scene, one that asked him to take the darkness one step further, Keanu did something that actors rarely do. He refused. Or at least he pushed back hard. Not because it was unsafe. Not because it was technically difficult. But because something inside him screamed that it was wrong. There was a line he was not sure he could cross, and what happened next did not just change the way people saw that role, it revealed a side of Keanu Reeves that most never knew existed. It was the kind of side that makes you look back at every character he has played and see them differently. The scene that changed everything was not even scripted to be the defining moment of the movie, but it became the one thing no one forgot, especially not Keanu. On paper, the scene was simple. Donnie Barksdale, furious and drunk, confronts Annie Wilson, the small-town psychic played by Cate Blanchett. Words are exchanged, tension rises, and then Donnie punches Annie hard in the stomach. She collapses, and he walks away seething. That was it, a few seconds of screen time. But in reality, this scene became a war zone, not between actors but between Keanu and his conscience. To understand why it hit so hard, you have to know the tone of the gift. The film deals with serious, deeply unsettling themes, mistreatment, trauma, buried secrets. It is not a movie that holds your hand. It drags you through the swamp and dares you to look away. Sam Raimi's direction made sure of that. There was no glamour, no heroic ending waiting behind the scenes. And Donnie, he was the embodiment of every threat lurking beneath the surface of a quiet town. He was not a villain in the comic book sense. He was far scarier than that. He was real. So when it came time to shoot the scene where Donnie physically attacks Annie, something shifted. Keanu froze. This was not a stunt. This was not a fight choreography session where everyone gets a cool takedown moment. This was an act of pure violence, and he was the one delivering it. Everyone on set could feel it. Keanu did not want to do it. He did not throw a tantrum. He did not storm off. But he stood there, unwilling to move forward. According to those who were there, he asked Raimi, "Do we really need to see this?" He was not questioning the direction to be difficult. He genuinely did not want to hurt someone, even in fiction, especially not a woman, especially not Cate. Cate Blanchett, ever the professional, reassured him. She knew how to separate the actor from the act. She reminded him they were telling a story, one that sometimes required pain to reveal the truth. Sam Raimi echoed the same. But Keanu was not worried about the audience or the narrative. He was worried about the act itself, what it would feel like, what it would mean. That hesitation, that discomfort, it was not weakness. It was awareness. In the end, Keanu went through with the scene, carefully, reluctantly, respectfully. The punch was choreographed down to the inch. The physical contact may have been fake, but the emotional weight was not. What made it all so powerful was that Keanu's reluctance bled into the scene. You can see it in his eyes. Donnie may be full of rage, but there is a flicker of hesitation right before the blow lands. Something that feels almost human. And that is the contradiction. Keanu played a monster, but he could not let go of his humanity to do it. When the film was released, that moment stuck with people, not because it was flashy, not because it was shocking, but because it felt real. And now, knowing what we know, that Keanu did not even want to pretend to hurt someone, you will never see that moment the same way again. Because that was not acting. That was a man confronting something darker than a character. That was a man looking at violence and asking, what does this really say about us? And once you know that, it changes everything. Behind the camera, what most people saw in The Gift was a gritty Southern thriller. But what the audience did not see was the emotional toll the film took on its cast, especially Keanu Reeves. On screen, he was terrifying. But off-screen, the mask did not fit quite so easily. Behind every line he delivered, every aggressive stare or threatening move, was a quiet internal battle. Because for Keanu, this was not just another role. It was something that cut against everything he stood for. Donnie Barksdale was the opposite of Keanu in every imaginable way. Where Keanu is calm, Donnie is volatile. Where Keanu is soft-spoken and thoughtful, Donnie is crude and confrontational. And where Keanu has built a career on empathy, Donnie thrives on control and cruelty. Playing him was not just uncomfortable, it was foreign. And yet, Keanu agreed to do it. Not because he wanted to shock audiences, but because he understood the importance of stories that hold up a mirror to real-life issues. And if stepping into Donnie's skin helped show that, then maybe it was worth it. That was Keanu's mindset going in. But what he did not expect was how deeply it would affect him. The crew began to notice it early on. Between takes, Keanu was not his usual composed self. He was not withdrawn, but he also was not chatting or cracking jokes. He kept to himself more than usual. And when it came time to shoot the heavier scenes, especially the ones involving violence, his whole demeanor changed. One crew member recalled how he would rehearse every movement again and again, double-checking that no one would actually get hurt. He was more concerned about the actors than he was about his own performance. They said you could tell he hated being that person, even for pretend. Hilary Swank, who played his on-screen wife, later commented on how gentle Keanu was off-camera, despite having to play a man who physically and emotionally tormented her character. Keanu made sure every interaction behind the scenes was handled with care. He admitted in a rare interview that Donnie was one of the few roles that stayed with him in a bad way. It lingered. He said, "It made me think a lot about the people who deal with this in real life, the fear, the silence, the damage." Sam Raimi, the director, later revealed that while Keanu never complained or tried to change the script, he did have to be gently pushed through some of the darker moments. He was too good of a person, Raimi said. He did not want to go there. But when he did, he went all the way. And the pain you see on screen, that is not just acting. That is his soul pushing back. And maybe that is the part people never understood about Keanu Reeves. He is not the kind of actor who just memorizes lines and hits marks. He feels his roles. He lets them in. And when a character like Donnie Barksdale gets in, it doesn't leave quietly. So while critics praised the performance, called it unexpected and brilliantly unsettling, they had no idea what it took to get there. They didn't see the mental tug-of-war behind every scene, the silent dread between takes, the quiet apologies after fake punches. But it all matters because behind the camera, Keanu was still Keanu, and he never stopped being him even when the script begged him to. The heart behind the violence. It is one thing to play a dark character, it is another thing to feel the darkness and still move forward with the performance. That is where Keanu Reeves stood while filming The Gift. He was not simply acting out a role, he was wrestling with the emotional cost of becoming someone he fundamentally rejected. Every scene as Donnie Barksdale chipped away at him, not because it was physically difficult but because it ran so deeply against his nature. And the more violent Donnie became, the harder it was for Keanu to look in the mirror afterward. There is a reason his co-stars remember him so vividly from that shoot, not because of his acting but because of the way he handled the weight of it all. Cate Blanchett, who shared the most brutal scene with him, later said Keanu approached it with a kind of reverence. He was shaken, she recalled. He did not want to fake a punch. He did not want to act angry. He wanted it to be safe, real yes, but never reckless. It is rare to hear actors talk that way. Hollywood tends to reward those who dive into darkness and do not look back. But Keanu never bought into that myth. He did not believe you had to destroy yourself to make something meaningful. Instead, he believed in boundaries, in compassion, in remembering that the person standing across from you is still a human being, even when the scene calls for anything but. And that is where the truth of Keanu begins to reveal itself. He is not revered just because he plays cool characters. He is revered because behind every role, there is a moral compass that refuses to spin out. He has made mistakes like anyone else, sure, but when it comes to the way he treats people both on and off set, the consistency is unmatched. You hear the same stories from cast after cast. He listens. He shows up early. He stays late. He never acts like he is above anyone. That is the part that made filming The Gift so strange for him. He was not just playing someone unlike himself, he was embodying a version of masculinity that he finds deeply toxic. He saw Donnie Barksdale for what he was, a man who used fear to keep himself from falling apart. And while many actors would take that as a juicy opportunity, Keanu saw it as a responsibility. He knew he had to get it right, but he also knew the risk of going too far. In interviews, he never boasted about the role. He never framed it as a career highlight. In fact, he barely talked about it at all. But when he did, it was clear the experience left a mark. He described it as intense in a way I did not expect. You could tell he did not enjoy being that person, even for pretend. And yet, that is exactly what gave the performance its weight. Because when Keanu delivered those lines, when he glared and threatened and hit, you could feel the tension underneath. The tension between the character and the actor. Donnie was lashing out, but Keanu was holding back. Not because he could not go there, but because he did not want to. And that hesitation, that flicker of discomfort, it made the role real in a way pure rage never could. Violence without empathy is just noise. But violence performed by someone who understands its cost, that is unforgettable. And that is the difference. That is the part people miss when they talk about Keanu Reeves. He does not just act, he carries the weight of what it means to act, what it means to hurt someone even in fiction. And that burden, he never shrugs it off. Keanu breaks silence. Years passed. The gift came and went, tucked away in the shadow of Keanu's bigger roles. Most people moved on, never realizing what had taken place on that quiet southern set. But then came a rare moment. An interview where Keanu finally opened up. He sat there, calm as always, but there was a weight behind his eyes, like something had been sitting with him for far too long. And then he said it. "I can finally reveal this," he began, voice low, steady. "There was a scene in that movie where I had to hit Cate Blanchett's character in the stomach, just punch her, and I could not do it, not even pretend." He paused. You could feel the tension in the room. "I stopped everything. I told the director, I am not sure I can go through with this. I do not want to put that energy into the world. I know it is fiction, I know it is acting, but that does not make it feel any better." There it was, the unfiltered truth. Keanu Reeves, the man who has mowed down armies on screen, could not bring himself to fake a moment of domestic violence. Not because he lacked the ability, but because he felt too much. Because he knew that scene, however short, would live on, and he did not want to be remembered for that kind of hurt. "I had to sit with that," he admitted. "It made me question why I took the role. But maybe that was the point. Maybe we need to ask ourselves why we show certain things and how we show them. And that is when it hits you. This is not just another actor telling a behind-the-scenes story. This is a man who carries the weight of what his characters do. A man who does not hide behind the phrase 'it is just a movie.' A man who, even in make-believe, draws a line. And once you hear that, once you understand what it cost him to shoot that scene, you will never be able to look at Keanu Reeves the same way again. Because now you know. Now you have seen the quiet humanity that exists beneath the roles. Now you understand that behind the myth, behind the movies, behind the action, is a man who feels everything, and he never lets it go. If the man best known for playing cold-blooded assassins and bullet-dodging heroes could not bring himself to fake a punch, what does that tell us about who he really is?